Commander Vexthala sat in the sterile white room of the Zephyrian military hospital with his three eyes fixed on the metal table between him and intelligence officer Creedon. His chitinous exoskeleton bore deep scars from plasma burns, and his mandibles clicked nervously as he prepared to speak about things that still haunted his dreams. The wounds on his body had healed, but the memories remained as fresh as the day they happened. Creedon activated the recording device and leaned forward with interest. "Tell me about the humans, Commander," he said in a voice that tried to sound calm but carried hints of fear. "Tell me what really happened at Europa Station." Vexthalas' compound eyes darted around the room as if checking for threats that might be hiding in the shadows. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The humans are not what we thought they were," he began. "We made a terrible mistake when we decided to invade their territory." The story began 3 cycles ago when Vexthala was still a proud battalion commander leading 800 of the Empire's finest warriors. Intelligence reports had indicated that Europa Station was defended by only 200 human soldiers with inferior weapons and outdated equipment. The station was supposed to be an easy target that would serve as a stepping stone for the larger invasion of Earth's outer colonies. "We approached Europa Station with confidence," Vexthala continued as his claws scraped against the table surface. "Our ships were newer, and our weapons were more advanced. The humans had only basic projectile weapons, while we carried plasma rifles that could cut through their armor like paper. What could possibly go wrong? The first sign of trouble came when their landing shuttles touched down on the stations. Docking Bay. Lieutenant Jake Murphy was waiting for them with a smile on his face that made Vexthala's skin crawl even now as he remembered it. The human officer stood alone in the middle of the docking bay with his hands behind his back and that strange expression that humans called a grin. "Welcome to Europa Station," Murphy had said in perfect Zephyrian as Vexthala's troops poured out of their shuttles. "I hope you enjoy your stay here." Vexthala had ordered his soldiers to secure the human immediately, but Murphy just stood there without moving. He seemed completely calm, despite being outnumbered 40-1. That should have been the first warning that something was very wrong. "The human said he had a gift for us," Vexthala told Creedon as his voice grew even quieter. He pulled out a small device from his pocket and showed it to me. It looked like a simple communication device, but when he pressed a button, everything changed. The explosion that followed was unlike anything in Vexthala's military experience. The docking bay floor erupted in a series of coordinated blasts that sent debris flying in all directions. But these were not random explosions. They had been carefully planned to create maximum chaos while somehow leaving paths for the humans to escape through. Murphy vanished in the confusion, along with his smile, but his voice could be heard over the station's communication system. "Sorry about the mess, folks," he said with that casual tone that humans used when discussing the weather. "We had to do some redecorating before your arrival." Vexthala's battalion found themselves trapped in a maze of twisted metal and debris, where every step forward triggered another explosion. The humans had turned their own station into a giant trap using mining equipment and industrial explosives. Every corridor had been rigged with charges that would detonate when triggered by the weight of Zephyrian soldiers. "They used everything," Vexthala explained to Creedon with wonder and terror in his voice. "Mining drills became boring machines that could tunnel through our armor. Welding torches became flamethrowers that could melt through our shields. Even their food preparation equipment had been turned into weapons. The human defenders moved through the station like ghosts who knew every secret passage and hidden route. They would appear suddenly to attack small groups of Zephyrian soldiers and then disappear before reinforcements could arrive. Their weapons were crude but effective, and they used them with a creativity that defied all military logic. Sergeant Alex Rodriguez led a team of humans who had somehow gotten behind Zephyrian lines despite being completely surrounded. They emerged from ventilation shafts and maintenance tunnels to strike at supply lines and communication equipment. When Vexthala's troops tried to follow them into these passages, they found more traps waiting. The worst part was their timing. Vexthala continued as his mandibles clicked rapidly. They knew exactly when to trigger each explosion for maximum effect. When we tried to take the command center, they collapsed the entire section on top of us. But somehow they survived in pockets of space they had prepared in advance. The battle for Europa Station lasted 18 hours, but it felt like 18 days to the surviving Zephyrians. Every room they entered contained surprises that their military training had never prepared them for. The humans had turned ordinary furniture into barricades that could stop plasma fire and converted simple tools into deadly weapons. Captain Ben Taylor appeared to be leading the human defense from multiple locations at once. His voice could be heard giving orders from different parts of the station simultaneously. It took Vexthala several hours to realize that the humans were using their communication system to make it sound like they had more defenders than they actually did. They were playing mind games with us, Vexthala admitted with embarrassment. While we were trying to figure out how many humans we were fighting, they were setting up their final surprise. The end came when the humans triggered what they called their grand finale. Instead of defending the station's power core, they had rigged it to overload in a controlled manner that would destroy the station, but give everyone time to evacuate. Murphy's voice came over the communication system one last time, with instructions for both human and Zephyrian forces to reach the escape pods. That was when I realized the truth about humans. Vexthala told Creedon, as his eyes focused on something far beyond the hospital room walls. They were not trying to win the battle in the traditional sense. They were trying to make us understand that fighting them would always cost more than we were willing to pay. The evacuation was conducted with military precision as humans and humans. Zephyrians worked together to reach safety before the station's destruction. Murphy personally helped wounded Zephyrian soldiers reach the escape pods, while his own people made sure everyone got out alive. The humans' casual attitude never changed, even as alarms blared and the station shook around them. Europa Station exploded in a brilliant flash of light that could be seen from 3 star systems away. But it was not a random destruction. The humans had calculated the explosion to create a debris field that would make it impossible for Zephyrian ships to approach Earth's outer colonies for several months. Even in defeat, they had found a way to slow down the invasion. 200 humans held off 800 of our best soldiers, Vexthala concluded as he stared at his scarred claws. They destroyed their own station and somehow made us help them evacuate. When the battle was over, Murphy shook my hand and thanked me for an interesting day. That was when I knew we had made a terrible mistake. Creedon stopped the recording device and sat back in his chair with a troubled expression. The intelligence officer had heard rumors about human tactics, but this account was worse than anything he had imagined. If 200 humans could cause this much trouble, what would happen when the Empire faced their entire military? There are more stories, Vexthala said quietly as he noticed Creedon's expression. Much worse stories. Creedon reactivated the recording device the next morning after spending a sleepless night thinking about Vexthala's first account. The intelligence officer had filed an initial report with High Command, but he knew they would need more details before they would believe such impossible claims about human warfare tactics. He looked across the table at the scarred commander, who seemed even more nervous than the day before. "Tell me about the boarding action," Creedon said as he settled into his chair. "Tell me what happened aboard the Cosmic Judgment." Vexthala's 3 eyes closed simultaneously as he recalled memories that still made his exoskeleton shiver with fear. When he opened them again, his voice carried the weight of someone who had witnessed the impossible. "The humans are not bound by the same rules that govern civilized warfare," he began. "They see opportunities where others see only obstacles." The Battle of the Titan Nebula had been the Empire's attempt to crush human resistance with overwhelming firepower. The Zephyrian fleet consisted of 12 Dreadnought-class vessels, including the flagship Cosmic Judgment, where Vexthala served as tactical officer. Against them, the humans had brought only 6 ships that were smaller and appeared to be poorly armed. We should have known something was wrong when the human fleet approached us directly. Vexthala continued as his claws drummed against the table. No rational commander would charge straight at a superior force without some kind of plan. But Captain Lisa Blake seemed eager to engage us in close combat. The human ships moved in formation that made no tactical sense, according to Zephyrian military doctrine. They flew straight toward the center of the alien fleet, while broadcasting music on all frequencies. The strange sounds that humans called rock and roll filled the communication channels with noise that should have interfered with their own coordination. Blake's voice cut through the music with casual confidence that sent chills down Vexthala's spine. "This is Captain Blake of the UNS Defiance," she announced. "We have come to collect some overdue library books. Please prepare to be boarded." The statement was so absurd that the Zephyrian commanders initially thought it was some kind of translation error. Who would joke about library books in the middle of a space battle? The answer came when the human ships suddenly changed direction and split apart like flower petals opening to reveal their true purpose. They were not trying to engage us in ship-to-ship combat, Vexthala explained to Creedon. The entire approach was a distraction to get close enough for boarding operations. While we were focused on their weapons, they were studying our hull designs and looking for weaknesses. A first sign of human infiltration came from the waste management section of Deck 12. A maintenance worker reported strange sounds coming from the disposal systems, but security teams found nothing when they investigated. What they did not know was that Sergeant Alex Rodriguez and his team had already been inside the ship for 2 hours. The humans had approached the Cosmic Judgment in small pods disguised as space debris. Instead of trying to breach the heavily armored hull, they had found the waste disposal ports and somehow crawled through systems that were barely large enough for their bodies. No Zephyrian would have considered such a route because it was degrading and dangerous. They spent 6 hours moving through our ventilation systems, Vexthala told Creedon with amazement in his voice. 6 hours listening to our communications and learning our routines. They could have attacked at any time, but they waited until they understood exactly how the ship operated. Rodriguez's team had brought small containers of what appeared to be common cleaning supplies that they had stolen from a captured cargo vessel. Working in the ship's air circulation system, they mixed these chemicals to create a gas that would render Zephyrians unconscious without causing permanent harm. The process required precise timing and knowledge of atmospheric systems that should have been impossible for humans to acquire. Captain Blake coordinated the operation from her own ship while maintaining casual conversation with the Zephyrian fleet commander. She discussed weather conditions and asked about local restaurants as if she were a tourist instead of a military officer preparing to capture a dreadnought. Her relaxed attitude made the aliens believe they were dealing with an inexperienced commander. The gas began to affect the crew slowly. Vexthala continued as his mandibles clicked with nervous energy. At first, we thought it was just fatigue from the long battle preparations. Soldiers would sit down for a moment and fall asleep at their posts. We assumed they were tired from working double shifts. The human infiltrators moved through the ship like invisible predators who knew every corridor and maintenance shaft. They had somehow obtained complete blueprints of Zephyrian ship designs and studied them in detail before the battle. While the crew fell unconscious, the humans took control of critical systems one by one. Rodriguez appeared on the bridge, wearing a Zephyrian uniform that he had taken from a sleeping guard. He walked calmly to the weapons control station and began entering commands while the bridge crew watched in confusion. His knowledge of Zephyrian technology was so complete that he operated the systems better than some of the original operators. He smiled at us, Vexthala said with wonder. While he was taking control of our most powerful weapons, he smiled and nodded as if he were greeting neighbors. When the ship commander tried to stop him, Rodriguez explained that he was following direct orders from Captain Blake, who was now in command of the vessel. The humans had not just infiltrated one ship, but had somehow managed to board 3 of the 12 dreadnoughts simultaneously. Teams led by officers named Jake Murphy, Ben Taylor, and Kate Foster were conducting identical operations on other vessels. The coordination required for such a complex mission should have been impossible without detection. Blake's voice came over the ship's communication system with the same casual tone she had used throughout the battle. "Attention, crew of the Cosmic. Judgment," she announced. "You have been temporarily borrowed by the human fleet. Please remain calm while we return some library books to your friends." The captured Zephyrian ships began firing on their own fleet with weapons that the humans had somehow reprogrammed for maximum effectiveness. But they were not trying to destroy the other vessels. Instead, they targeted engine systems and communication, arrays to disable the ships without killing their crews. The precision required for such shots demonstrated a level of skill that impressed even enemy commanders. They turned our own weapons against us, but they used them more effectively than we ever had, Vexthala admitted with grudging respect. Rodriguez made shots that our best gunners could not have made. He seemed to understand our weapon systems better than the engineers who designed them. The battle ended when the remaining Zephyrian ships found themselves surrounded by their own captured vessels. The humans offered terms for surrender that were surprisingly generous considering their tactical advantage. They would return the captured ships and crews in exchange for a promise to avoid human territory for one full cycle. Captain Blake appeared on the main screen of every ship in the fleet with that confident smile that had become her trademark. "Thank you for letting us borrow your ships," she said, as if she had been given permission instead of taking them by force. "The library books have been returned and all late fees have been waived. Please drive safely on your way home." The humans evacuated the captured ships using the same waste disposal systems they had used to board them. They left behind small gifts for the Zephyrian crews, including packages of what they called coffee and chocolate, along with notes thanking them for their hospitality. The casual nature of these gestures was somehow more disturbing than open hostility would have been. They treated the entire operation like a training exercise, Vexthala concluded as he stared at his reflection in the metal table. While we were fighting for our lives, they were practicing new techniques and having fun. Blake actually thanked our commander for providing such an interesting challenge. The captured ships were returned exactly as promised with no permanent damage and no crew members harmed. But the psychological impact on the Zephyrian fleet was devastating. Every soldier who had been aboard those vessels would forever remember how easily humans had infiltrated their most secure ships and turned their own weapons against them. Creedon made notes on his datapad while trying to process the implications of what he had heard. If humans could board Zephyrian ships through waste disposal systems and control their weapons better than trained operators, what other impossible tactics might they have developed? "There are more stories," Vexthala said quietly as he noticed the intelligence officer's troubled expression. "Stories that will make you question everything we thought we knew about warfare." The third day of interviews found Creedon arriving early at the hospital with a growing sense of dread about what he might learn. His reports to High Command had been met with skepticism and demands for more concrete evidence of human capabilities. The intelligence officer hoped that Vexthala's Next account would provide the details needed to convince the Empire's leaders that they faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. Vex Stela appeared more composed than in previous sessions, but his three eyes held a distant look that suggested he was seeing things that existed only in memory. When he spoke, his voice carried the tone of someone who had witnessed events that defied all logical explanation. The attack on Kepler 442b was supposed to be our moment of triumph. He began as his claws traced patterns on the metal table surface. 2,000 of our best assault troops against 200 human defenders who had nowhere to run and no hope of reinforcement. It should have been a simple matter of overwhelming them with superior numbers. The mining colony of Kepler 442b had been chosen as a target because of its strategic location and valuable mineral deposits. Intelligence reports indicated that the human defenders were led by Colonel Danny Wright, a career officer with extensive experience in defensive operations. What the reports failed to mention was Wright's tendency to see possibilities where others saw only problems. We approached the planet with confidence, Vex Thala continued as his mandibles clicked softly. Our landing craft carried enough firepower to level the entire colony, and we had air support from 12 attack fighters. The humans had only basic fortifications and equipment that was clearly designed for mining rather than warfare. The first phase of the assault went exactly according to plan, as Zephyrian forces established beachheads around the colony's perimeter. Wright's defenders put up token resistance before beginning what appeared to be a disorganized retreat toward the planet's mountainous interior. The human colonel's communications were intercepted and seemed to confirm that his forces were demoralized and unprepared for the scale of the attack. We should have been suspicious when the retreat looked so. Chaotic Vex Thala admitted with the wisdom of hindsight. Military units do not usually abandon their positions so quickly unless they have been completely broken. But Wright's people seemed to be running in panic toward the cave systems that honeycombed the mountain range. Major Kate Foster led the apparent evacuation of civilian personnel through passages that appeared to have been hastily prepared for emergency use. Her voice could be heard on radio frequencies, urging people to move quickly and warning about Zephyrian pursuit forces. The communications painted a picture of desperate humans trying to save what they could from an overwhelming defeat. Captain Ben Taylor coordinated the movement of military equipment and supplies with obvious difficulty. His team seemed to be struggling with heavy mining machinery that they were trying to transport through tunnels that were barely large enough for the equipment. The entire operation looked like the kind of desperate improvisation that occurs when careful plans fall apart under pressure. We followed them into the caves because that was the logical tactical choice, Vex Thala explained to Creedon. Underground, fighting would favor our superior numbers and training while limiting the humans to small unit actions. The cave systems offered no possibility of escape, so we could trap them and force a final battle on our terms. The Zephyrian pursuit began with standard cave fighting techniques as assault teams moved through the tunnels in coordinated formations. The passages were wider than expected and showed signs of recent modification that suggested the humans had been preparing defensive positions. Wright's forces conducted a fighting retreat that seemed designed to slow down the pursuit rather than stop it. The first sign that something was wrong came when Zephyrian engineers noticed that the cave modifications were far more extensive than they had initially appeared. Passages had been widened and reinforced with materials that seemed to have been taken from mining operations. Support beams and ventilation systems showed a level of planning that would have taken months to complete. The humans had not been preparing for an evacuation, Vex Thala said as understanding dawned in his voice. They had been preparing a trap that was designed specifically for our forces. Every tunnel we entered had been modified to channel us toward predetermined locations where they could control the terms of engagement. Foster's engineering teams had spent the previous year mapping every cave system on the planet and identifying points where controlled explosions could redirect. Underground water flows. They had also located areas where the planet's geothermal activity could be manipulated to create steam vents and pressure changes that would affect air quality in the tunnels. Taylor's apparent struggle with mining equipment had actually been the careful placement of excavation charges at strategic points throughout the cave network. The humans had turned their own mining operation into a weapon that could reshape the underground geography to suit their tactical needs. Every piece of equipment that seemed abandoned had actually been positioned for maximum effect. Wright was not retreating. Vex Thala continued with growing amazement. He was leading us deeper into a maze that his people had designed specifically to trap Zephyrian forces. Every step we took forward moved us closer to positions where they could use the planet itself as a weapon against us. The human defenders had established fallback positions that allowed them to control movement through key passages, while remaining mobile enough to avoid decisive engagement. They used their knowledge of the cave systems to appear and disappear like ghosts who could move through solid rock. Communication became difficult as the tunnels interfered with electronic signals and created acoustic conditions that favored the defenders. Wright's voice could be heard throughout the cave system as he coordinated the defense with calm professionalism that contrasted sharply with the panic he had displayed during the initial retreat. His orders were precise and showed detailed knowledge of Zephyrian tactics and equipment limitations. The colonel had clearly studied his enemy and prepared countermeasures for every possible approach. The trap was sprung when our forces reached the deepest levels of the cave system. Vex Thala told Creedon as his eyes focused on distant memories. Foster had rigged the underground water systems to create a controlled flood that would force use toward higher ground where Taylor's charges were waiting. But that was not the worst part. The humans had somehow calculated the exact timing needed to use the planet's geothermal activity as part of their weapon system. When the underground water hit superheated rock formations, it created massive steam, explosions that collapsed entire sections of the tunnel network. The precision required for such timing suggested planning that went far beyond normal military preparation. Captain Jake Murphy appeared leading a team of miners who had been converted into combat engineers for the specific purpose of operating in underground conditions. They moved through the collapsing caves with equipment that allowed them to survive in environments that would kill most other species. Their knowledge of the tunnel system was so complete that they could navigate by touch in total darkness. They were not just fighting us, Vex Thala said with wonder and terror in his voice. They were reshaping the battlefield in real time to create conditions that favored their strengths while eliminating our advantages. We had superior numbers, but they had turned the entire planet into their weapon. The final phase of the trap involved a coordinated series of explosions that collapsed the main tunnels, while leaving escape routes that led directly into prepared ambush positions. Wright's forces used the chaos and confusion to pick off isolated Zephyrian units that had been separated from their main force by the cave-ins. Foster's engineering teams demonstrated knowledge of structural mechanics that allowed them to bring down specific sections of ceiling while leaving other areas intact. They could collapse a tunnel to block pursuit while ensuring that their own people could move through alternative passages that remained hidden until needed. The retreat had been a lie from the beginning, Vex Thala concluded as he stared at his scarred claws. Wright never intended to defend the surface installations. His entire strategy was based on luring us underground where he could use the planet's geology against us. We thought we were pursuing a broken enemy, but we were actually walking into the most sophisticated trap I have ever encountered. The surviving Zephyrian forces eventually reached the surface after 3 days of fighting in conditions that seemed designed to drive them insane. Of the 2,000 soldiers who had entered the cave system, only 600 emerged, and most of those were suffering from injuries or psychological trauma that would require extensive treatment. Wright appeared at the cave entrance to coordinate medical assistance for both human and Zephyrian casualties with the same calm professionalism he had shown throughout the battle. He personally helped wounded enemy soldiers reach evacuation points, while his own people provided water and basic supplies to anyone who needed them. Creedon entered the hospital room on the fourth day with reports from the front lines that seemed to confirm some of Vexthala's impossible claims. Zephyrian commanders were reporting encounters with human ships that had supposedly been destroyed. In previous battles, and intelligence analysts were struggling to explain how the enemy fleet seemed to be growing larger despite continuous losses in combat. Vexthala sat in his usual position, but his demeanor had changed from the previous sessions. There was something approaching awe in his three eyes as he prepared to recount events that had shattered his understanding of how warfare was supposed to function. When he spoke, his voice carried the tone of someone describing miracles that defied natural law. The humans have a different relationship with death than we do. He began as his claws traced invisible patterns on the metal table. When we lose a ship, it is gone forever. But when they lose a ship, it becomes raw material for building something even more dangerous. They do not mourn their losses. They recycle them. The encounter that would forever change Vexthala's perception of human capabilities occurred during the third week of the campaign when his squadron intercepted what appeared to be a small human convoy near the asteroid belt of the Proxima system. Intelligence reports indicated that the ships were transporting refugees from recently captured colonies and would be lightly defended. We expected to find cargo vessels filled with civilians trying to escape the war zone, Vexthala continued, as his mandibles clicked softly. Instead, we encountered the Unsea Phoenix under the command of Captain Ryan Clark, a ship that our records showed had been destroyed 2 months earlier during the Battle of Titan Station. The Phoenix approached the Zephyrian squadron with a confidence that seemed inappropriate for a vessel that should not have existed. Clark's communications were filled with casual banter about the weather and requests for updated stellar navigation charts, as if he were meeting old friends, rather than engaging enemy forces in combat. The ship looked wrong, Vexthala explained, to Creedon with confusion still evident in his voice. The hull was a patchwork of different metals and materials that came from at least 6 different vessel types. Parts of it were clearly Zephyrian technology that had been modified and integrated with human systems in ways that should have been impossible. Chief Engineer Megan Davis had somehow rebuilt the Phoenix from the wreckage of multiple ships using salvage techniques that violated every principle of spaceship construction. The vessel's superstructure combined elements from destroyed human warships, captured Zephyrian technology, and civilian components that had been repurposed for military use. The ship's weapon systems were equally bizarre, consisting of mining, lasers that had been converted into combat units, industrial fabrication tools that functioned as missile launchers, and what appeared to be agricultural equipment that had been modified to project some kind of electromagnetic field. Nothing about the Phoenix made sense according to conventional design principles, but it clearly worked. Davis contacted us directly to explain how she had built the ship, Vexthala said with wonder in his voice. She seemed proud of her work and wanted to share technical details about the modifications she had made, while we were fighting for our lives. She was giving us a guided tour of her engineering achievements. The conversation revealed that the Phoenix was only one example of what humans called their ghost fleet, consisting of dozens of ships that had been rebuilt from battlefield, salvage using techniques that combined desperation with genius. Each vessel was unique because it incorporated whatever materials had been available at the time of construction. Captain Clark explained that the rebuilding process had been coordinated by Admiral Nancy Johnson, who had issued orders that no human ship was ever truly destroyed as long as any significant portions of it remained intact. Salvage teams led by officers like Lieutenant Commander Steve Adams were tasked with recovering useful components and turning them into new vessels. They were not just rebuilding ships. Vex Thala continued as understanding dawned in his expression. They were creating an entirely new class of warship that combined the best features of multiple designs while eliminating the weaknesses of any single approach. Each ghost ship was better than the original vessels that had been used to create. The Phoenix demonstrated capabilities that exceeded those of ships twice its size by using systems that worked together in ways that their original designers had never intended. Davis had somehow integrated Zephyrian shield technology with human weapon systems to create defensive capabilities that were stronger than either species had achieved independently. The ship's crew had been assembled from survivors of other destroyed vessels who brought experience from different military specialties. Clark commanded pilots who had served on everything from fighter craft to capital ships, giving him tactical flexibility that was impossible to predict or counter. His people could adapt to any situation because they had already survived the worst possible circumstances. The battle was unlike anything in my experience, Vex Thala told Creedon as his eyes focused on distant memories. The Phoenix moved like a fighter, but hit like a battleship while somehow maintaining the defensive capabilities of a fortress. It was as if Davis had taken the best qualities of every ship type and combined them into a single vessel. The engagement was further complicated by the arrival of additional ghost ships that appeared throughout the battle zone as if materializing from empty space. Each vessel was commanded by officers who had supposedly been killed in previous encounters, and all of them seemed eager to demonstrate the unique capabilities of their rebuilt ships. Commander Troy Mitchell arrived in what he called the Uns. Lazarus, a ship that had been built entirely from the wreckage of civilian cargo vessels, but somehow carried enough firepower to engage Zephyrian cruisers on equal terms. His crew consisted of merchant sailors who had been converted into combat personnel through necessity and desperation. Captain Amy Cooper commanded the Uns in Frankenstein, a vessel that looked like it had been assembled by committee from spare parts, but demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceeded those of purpose-built military ships. Her engineering team had somehow created a propulsion system that allowed the ship to change direction in ways that violated basic principles of physics. They were not just fighting us, Vex Thala said with growing amazement. They were experimenting with new technologies and tactics while using our forces as test subjects for their latest innovations. Every battle was an opportunity for them to try something that had never been attempted before. The Ghost Fleet demonstrated coordination that should have been impossible for ships with such diverse origins and capabilities. The vessels moved together like parts of a single organism while maintaining individual tactical flexibility that allowed them to adapt to changing circumstances without losing overall strategic coherence. Clark's communications revealed that the ghost ships were connected by a network that shared tactical data in real time, while allowing each captain to make independent decisions based on local conditions. The system combined centralized strategic planning with decentralized tactical execution in ways that maximized both flexibility and effectiveness. The worst part was their attitude, Vex Thala continued as his mandibles clicked with nervous energy. They treated the entire battle like a reunion of old friends who were showing off their latest projects. While we were fighting for our lives, they were comparing notes about engineering modifications and sharing jokes about their previous deaths. The battle ended when Zephyrian forces found themselves completely outmaneuvered by ships that should not have been able to function, but somehow performed better than anything in either fleet. The ghost ships withdrew in good order while broadcasting music and expressing gratitude for what they called an interesting training exercise. Captain Clark appeared on screen to thank the Zephyrian commanders for providing such a valuable test data for the Ghost Fleet project. He explained that Admiral Johnson was always looking for opportunities to evaluate new ship designs under combat conditions and appreciated the chance to gather performance statistics. They were treating us like unpaid consultants in their research and development program, Vex Thala said with disbelief. While we thought we were fighting a war, they were conducting field tests of experimental technology, using our forces as willing participants in their evaluation process. The encounter left Zephyrian intelligence completely unable to predict human fleet strength or capabilities, because ships that were confirmed destroyed kept reappearing in new configurations with enhanced performance characteristics. Traditional methods of assessing enemy forces became meaningless when every loss potentially created something more dangerous. Davis contacted Zephyrian engineers after the battle to share technical specifications for some of her modifications, along with suggestions for how they might improve their own ship designs. Her casual offer to collaborate on joint projects was somehow more disturbing than direct threats would have been. The humans do not see death as an ending, Vex Thala concluded, as he stared at his reflection in the metal table. Creedon arrived at the hospital on the final day of interviews, with orders from High Command to extract every possible detail about human military capabilities. The intelligence reports he had filed throughout the week had caused panic in the upper levels of the Zephyrian government, as military planners realized they were facing an enemy that operated outside all conventional understanding of warfare. Vex Thala appeared calmer than he had during previous sessions, but his three eyes held a depth of knowledge that seemed almost painful to contemplate. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had witnessed the complete redefinition of what was possible in military conflict. The final battle was not really a battle at all, he began, as his claws remained perfectly still on the metal table surface. It was a demonstration designed to show us exactly how many different ways the humans could destroy us if they chose to do so. Admiral Nancy Johnson did not just defeat our fleet. She gave us a comprehensive education in the futility of fighting her species. The engagement that would end the Zephyrian invasion occurred in the outer reaches of the Sol system, where the Empire's remaining forces had gathered for what they believed would be a decisive assault on Earth itself. Intelligence estimates suggested that the human home fleet consisted of fewer than 50 ships, against the 200 vessels that remained under Zephyrian command. We approached Earth with confidence restored by our superior numbers, Vex Thala continued as his mandibles clicked softly. The previous encounters with humans had been costly, but we attributed our losses to unfamiliarity with their unconventional tactics. Now that we understood their methods, we believed we could counter them with proper preparation and overwhelming force. Admiral Johnson's fleet appeared exactly where Zephyrian intelligence had predicted it would be, positioned between the invading forces and Earth in a formation that looked almost ceremonial in its precision. The human ships were arranged in perfect geometric patterns that seemed designed more for visual effect than tactical advantage. Johnson's opening communication was broadcast on all frequencies with crystal clarity that suggested she wanted every member of both fleets to hear her words. "Welcome to the Sol system," she announced with the casual confidence that had become the trademark of human military officers. "Today we will be conducting a comprehensive examination of interstellar warfare techniques. Please observe carefully, as there will be a test afterward." She was treating the battle like a classroom lecture. Vex Thala explained to Creedon with wonder still evident in his voice. While we were preparing for the most important engagement of the war, she was organizing an educational demonstration designed to teach us why fighting humans was a mistake. The first phase of Johnson's demonstration involved showing how human ships could continue fighting after suffering damage that should have been catastrophic. Captain Peter Hayes commanded a destroyer that deliberately allowed itself to be hit by Zephyrian plasma fire, while his crew worked to maintain combat effectiveness using backup systems and emergency repairs. Hayes provided running commentary. Throughout the process, as his ship absorbed punishment that would have disabled any Zephyrian vessel. As you can see, he explained over open channels, human ships are designed with multiple redundancies that allow us to keep fighting, even when primary systems are offline. This is lesson number 1 in human military engineering. The demonstration continued as other human commanders showcased different aspects of their tactical doctrine. Commander Amy Cooper showed how civilian ships could be converted into effective warships by using asteroid mining equipment as kinetic bombardment platforms. Her cargo vessels launched projectiles with devastating accuracy while maintaining the appearance of harmless merchant traffic. They were not trying to hide their capabilities, Vexthala said as understanding dawned in his expression. Johnson wanted us to see exactly what humans could do, so that we would understand the full scope of our mistake in challenging them. Every technique they demonstrated was a lesson in why conventional military thinking was inadequate against their forces. Captain Troy Mitchell provided a masterclass in improvised weapons by showing how luxury cruise ships could be fitted with military-grade defensive systems while maintaining their original appearance. His vessel looked like a vacation transport, but carried enough firepower to engage capital ships while providing commentary about the modifications his crew had made. The psychological warfare component of Johnson's demonstration was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire engagement. Throughout the battle, human forces broadcast music, shared jokes, and maintained casual conversations that suggested they were enjoying themselves rather than fighting for their lives. They were having fun, Vexthala told Creedon with disbelief, still evident in his voice. While we were experiencing the most terrifying battle of our lives, they were listening to something called jazz music and discussing their favorite Earth foods. Captain Jake Murphy actually asked our fleet commander for restaurant recommendations during a particularly intense exchange of fire. The coordinated assault that followed demonstrated tactical coordination that exceeded anything in Zephyrian military doctrine. Human ships moved together like dancers performing a choreographed routine while maintaining individual flexibility that allowed them to adapt to changing circumstances without losing overall strategic coherence. Johnson's fleet showcased weapons that had been improvised from civilian equipment with effectiveness that matched or exceeded purpose-built military systems. Mining lasers became precision cutting tools that could disable enemy ships without destroying them. Agricultural spraying equipment was converted into delivery systems for electronic warfare packages that disrupted Zephyrian communications. Every ship in their fleet was carrying different weapons, Vexthala continued as his eyes focused on distant memories. They had turned the entire human economy into a military production system where any civilian technology could be converted into a weapon if necessary. We were not fighting just their military. We were fighting their entire civilization. The final phase of the demonstration involved Captain Ben Taylor showing how human forces could coordinate suicide attacks while somehow ensuring the survival of their own personnel. His ship rigged itself as a massive explosive device and flew directly into the center of the Zephyrian formation before detonating in a blast that disabled 6 enemy vessels. Taylor's voice could be heard throughout the explosion as he provided technical details about the shaped charges his team had constructed and the timing required to achieve maximum effect while minimizing casualties. When the blast cleared, his escape pod was transmitting requests for pickup along with suggestions for improving the explosive yield of similar devices. He had turned his own ship into a weapon and survived the explosion while taking out a significant portion of our fleet, Vexthala said with amazement and terror. But he was not trying to kill us. The blast was designed to disable our ships rather than destroy them completely. Even in their most devastating attacks, the humans were showing restraint. The battle concluded with Johnson's forces demonstrating complete tactical superiority while suffering minimal losses themselves. The Zephyrian fleet found itself surrounded by human ships that had somehow appeared from multiple directions, using techniques that seemed to violate basic principles of space navigation. Johnson appeared on screen to address both fleets with the calm professionalism that had characterized her entire demonstration. "Class dismissed," she announced with a smile that somehow managed to be both friendly and terrifying. "I hope everyone has learned something valuable about the principles of human military doctrine. Please collect your homework assignments before leaving the system." The homework was a complete technical analysis of every mistake we had made during the battle, Vexthala explained as his mandibles clicked with nervous energy. Johnson's people had recorded our entire tactical approach and prepared detailed critiques of our strategy, equipment, and coordination. They were offering to help us improve our military capabilities. The surrender negotiations were conducted with the same casual efficiency that had characterized the entire human military campaign. Johnson offered terms that were surprisingly generous, considering the complete defeat of Zephyrian forces. The Empire would withdraw from human space and provide reparations for damage caused during the invasion. In exchange, the humans offered to share certain technological innovations that could improve Zephyrian ship designs and military doctrine. They also provided medical assistance for wounded personnel and transportation back to Empire space for all surviving forces. The generosity of these terms was somehow more disturbing than harsh punishment would have been. Johnson personally thanked me for participating in what she called a valuable learning experience, Vexthala concluded as he stared at his scarred claws. She explained that human military forces needed regular opportunities to test new techniques and equipment under realistic conditions. Our invasion had provided exactly the kind of comprehensive field exercise that their training programs required.